Okay. All right, so first thing I wanted to go over is the review of our vectorizing logos. Again, this is the final review for Adobe Illustrator. So what I did was snag this logo online. I'm going to Command Spacebar, click and drag to zoom in here. I can see that my edges are kind of frayed, rasterized, if you will. And so essentially what I'm going to do is just click on this logo with my selection tool. I can get to it by clicking on V and clicking on this piece and hitting the letter S on my keyboard, just clicking the center then after that, clicking outside of the pasteboard here and then dragging towards the center. This is going to just scale it down evenly. I was holding the shift key at that time, so I was constraining the proportions width and height. And if I'm going too fast, just let me know and I can repeat whatever you all need. But essentially, I just click the logo here. I'm going to hit Command Y to see the invisibles, right? Like the invisible points and paths. You can see here that there's nothing. It's just a placed JPEG image. So what I'm going to do is just hit this image trace button up here. And this is really just going to make this image not yet a vector image, but giving you a preview of what a vector image would look like based on this piece. So, you know, it looks like the logo, but it's not in color. So I'm just going to go up to this preset menu up here under default. And then I'm just going to click on, you can click on color, so it's going to like simplify this logo. I'll try 6 colors and see what that looks like, if that looks like the logo. As much as possible, then yeah, that looks pretty good. So again, I'm going to Command Y just to see that, yeah, it's not traced out, right? It's still a JPEG, but I'm seeing a preview of what this vector art's going to look like. The last piece of it is just to hit this expand button. This is going to take everything that was traced and really make points and paths out of it. And so once I click that button, you can see that my points and paths have been automatically created here. And now I'm going to hit Command Y. So now I'm seeing the invisible. So now you can see that this image is all points and paths, and it's a vector image. There is this annoying part about it, which is, this edge here. I can select it by hitting the letter A. That's going to select my direct selection tool up here, this white arrow, and that's going to select just the individual path that I had selected, and then I'm just going to delete. So now I have this logo isolated on the background, no border around it. And this I can, you know, this is our vector art, so I can just scale this up to as big as I want without losing any of the quality. And again, you're going to go in here and see that the edges are clean as far as you want to get into there. And I'll even draw a box to show that this is you know, this is a logo that's isolated in the background. You can see that there's still these white shapes here. This is a result of the live trace, so you can essentially click on this direct selection tool, this white arrow again, or press A, select these little white kind of cutouts, and just delete them. So once you get that kind of done, you know, you have kind of a really decent logo to work with, and increase the size. You can just copy and paste this into InDesign if you wanted to. You know, I could actually take my magic wand tool and just select one of these, and it's going to select all of the like shapes that have those assets. So this bouncing word here. I didn't have to select it because I used my wand on this little white piece there, and then I can just hit delete, delete. And then so you have your logo on an isolated, background. So as you all are, searching around for logos, this is a good option. This is a really complex logo. I mean, it's got a lot of detail here. Most of the stuff that I've been seeing coming across, through the Moodle has been like real simple stuff. So it makes this, part much easier if you can't find an EPS file, a AI file, or a PDF file that doesn't have these outlines. So, are there any questions? Yes?
Say, for example, you have an image that's a JPEG. It has a completely white background, and you just want the image. Would you use like Photoshop or Illustrator to remove that image from its background?
You could use both, but if you want to convert that image to a vector file, then you can bring it into Illustrator here, and do kind of what I just did. So your brand is Jordan's, right?
Yeah.
So go ahead.
You could just search like what shoes. What is Google like Air Jordan?
This look. Oh, this one's good. Yeah.
I have a PNG. I just have an image of a shoe that I was going to remove. Usually I use Photoshop.
Oh, you were going to remove the logo from the
I'm
shoe.
going to remove the shoe from its white background.
Oh,
Yeah.
all Photoshop.
Photoshop?
Yep, all Photoshop. And I'll show you how to do that as we move forward. So, all right, great. So if there's any other questions about what I did here in Illustrator, okay. All right. And why I did that again is because you want to vectorize the logo rather than work with the raster image as much as you can, or as possible. So with that, we're going to go into Photoshop and then talk about that. Let's see what I got here. So if you're following along, what I want to do is, let's see here. Just work with some images. So in Photoshop, really, grab a photo, drag and drop it into the icon down here. It's going to open up your image, of course. So let me just, one of those times you need like 2 screens. Okay. So really, your image is going to come in. Up here, you're going to see what kind of color mode this photo is in. There's 2 different types of color modes, RGB, CMYK. RGB is the digital color model. RGB standing for red, green, blue. You can make a huge amount of colors using just those 3 lights, because essentially that's what it is light and white light in combination together to create a huge, vast amount of colors. More of the color spectrum can be recreated using RGB rather than CMYK, which is print, so cyan, magenta, yellow, and black. They use K to represent black for a reason I have no idea. That's just what they do in the print industry, so that's kind of how they refer to it as. So CMYK, cyan, it's like blue, magenta, it's like pink, yellow is yellow, black is K, black. So the reason why that's important when you're working with photos in Photoshop is based on the visual color spectrum that RGB gives you rather than what CMYK gives you. So essentially, you can only get so many, you can only get a certain blueness of blue in CMYK than you can on screen in RGB. And same with green, and et cetera, et cetera. So I'm wondering if this is going to actually change very much, but I'm going to zoom in here, maybe on this green, where it kind of gets to this rich green, and you go up to your image option here. You can actually change the color mode by hitting Image Mode and then selecting one of these color modes. So the only two that we're going to work with this semester is RGB and CMYK. RGB we're going to go back to when we start doing the digital stuff, the stuff in Flash, the online ads. CMYK is for the printed piece, which is the project we're into now. So hit CMYK, gives you just some pop-up. And now you can see, I don't know if you could see it on your that screen very well, but I'm going to undo, redo. See like that color change? So when you're like showing, you know, the green just got muddier, I guess, less rich. So here it is at RGB, here it is at CMYK, right? So that's one thing to keep in mind. Even the sky, you can tell. You know, here's RGB, it's real bright and vibrant, and then CMYK, it almost looks kind of dark and cloudy, or almost like gray skies rather than bright blue. But we're working in CMYK for print pieces. So what you want to do is, well, that's that piece. Let me show you then some of these selections or these tools in Photoshop. So Photoshop is really based on selecting things and changing the color of things. So in a little bit, we're gonna change the color of these pixels in this Photoshop document to make it look closer to the RGB version via photo editing in the CMYK version, right? So we're gonna target the greens. We're gonna give them a little more yellow, give them a little more cyan or blue, and then kind of try and bring it back as much as possible to the RGB version as we can. So what I'm going to show you are these tools here. So this is the Move tool. Basically, I can't really click anywhere and move anything on the screen because I have this locked layer. So when you bring in a photo, it's just going to come in and it's going to be locked. And you can tell when a layer is locked when you see this little lock here in the Layers palette. So to unlock it, you can simply just double click this kind of empty space, and then you're going to be prompted to name the layer. You can not name it anything. You could name it something now and change the name later. You can name it whatever you want it to be now. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm just going to call it background, very simply. So it's going to be unchanged here. I can double click background, this name here, and I can rename it like directly from here. So I can say like landscape. You know, so best practices is to name your layers accordingly. You know, background, shoe A, shoe B, shoe C, logo, whatever. You know, there's a lot more to the layers palette than just simply renaming it, but that's for like another time, really. Let's see. One of the big tools is the really this selection marquee tool. So it comes in a lot of different shapes, you know, and this is just cookie cutter stuff. You know, rectangle, elliptical, it's single row. So these two, rectangular and ellipse, I use, you know, more so than the other two. I really never use the other two at all. So you can jump to those quickly by L for the, oh, I'm sorry, it's not L, it's M. So M is going to get you your marquee tools. Whatever is the last marquee tool that you selected, M will choose, right? So whatever is in your top level menu here, that's what M is going to go to. So M really is the keyboard shortcut for all of these, or these two at the top, but just whichever one's active in this panel. So this works the same as the shape tools in Illustrator. It's just click and drag. Look at this, it's just going to kind of free form right now, but you can also hit the shift key and keep it a perfect square for this instance. I just released the mouse, so I have now these marching ants in a square around in this cloudy area. This means that this patch on this layer is selected, and I can edit that. So I can edit it, I can copy and paste it, I can click my move tool here, and then I can click this square and kind of drag it out, I can hold this square, I can just hover over this square, hit Alt, the Alt button, click and drag, and then I can duplicate it. So I can do all kinds of like fun stuff, if you will, with that. That's the simplest way to select things in Photoshop, is that way. Let me go back. So the simplest way to deselect something is, well, you could go to, let's see, select, deselect, and that'll deselect it, or you can just hit Command D, which is the way to go. So Command D, deselect it. Otherwise, if you like the menus, go up to select and then hit deselect, and then that'll do it too. So that's the simplest way to do it. Another way to select is to go up to select and select all. That'll select your entire canvas. So wherever you see the ants within that space is selected. Does anyone not know what I mean by like these marching ants? Okay. So everything within that marching ants border is selected. And the keyboard shortcut for that is Command A. Now, I just hit Command D to deselect. Command A can also be used in InDesign to select all. Command A can also be used in Illustrator to select all. You might want to do that when you have, several layers here going on. And we'll get to that a little bit later. It's a good little shortcut. So moving on, we have these, they're all lasso tools really. So we have the regular lasso tool. Kind of select that, and it's just kind of, I can create a shape. I'm just clicking and dragging and moving this thing around, right? I'm selecting this piece here. I can hit Shift. While holding Shift, you can see a little plus sign that's coming on or off. It's a little hard to see on this screen, but you can hold Shift and click and circle around something, and that expands the selection a little bit more. So see, I just hit my move tool and move that little piece out of the way, and then I'll Command D. That's good for, I'll show you what that's good for later on. It has its purpose. It's a really rough selection, and kind of when you're in a hurry, sometimes that helps. You're not going to use this tool to select something that has a really hard edge. Maybe you just want to really quick select this grass. I selected all this grass and a little bit of the sky, but it doesn't really matter because there's not very much green in the sky. And if I want to go and do an image adjustment to it, and then I can do Selective Color, and then I can choose my greens and make the greens, make it look like it's more of a dry season now. You could see that really the blue sky is not being affected because here in my menu I have targeted the greens and I'm just using the cyan slider. So if I'm in like a hurry, if I want to get it done quick, I'm not necessarily going to go in here and select every strand and blade of grass. The lasso tool has its purpose to where I can just circle the whole thing, general area, and then kind of refine my photo editing to just the green pixels or just the blue pixels or just the whatever pixels. So there's that tool that you can use. The Polygon Lasso tool. Again, these tools you can just go to by hitting L. So whatever you have active here in this column, L's the button that's going to get to that. So the Polygon Lasso tool, it's really just a click. It's like the pen tool, except it doesn't allow you to create the curves. So it's all geometric. It's just, you know, boom, boom, boom. And there's your, you know, polygon selection. Again, I can hit the V button, which will get me to the Move tool. And then I can just, you know, pull this out. Again, this probably has this has some uses to it as well. So that, yeah, you can kind of see a pattern. This is all about selection. So most of these menu items are all about selecting. Most of your work, you know, that you can get done within Photoshop are all in these menus, targeting colors, layering artwork. That's really where all of the, you know, work happens. If you're really good at selecting. So Magic Wand tool. The Magic Wand tool is really going to, let me get my eyedropper out. So I'm going to zoom in here. The Magic Wand tool works like on the pixel level. So if I get into this grassy area here, I can see that there's a lot of different tones of green. So what I'm going to do is click on the screen and show you. See that top half of that circle and how that green is kind of changing to different tones of green? It's focusing in on the pixel. So when I go up to like one of these lighter areas, you see that the green is getting lighter. So it's reading actually like the exact pixel that my icon or my little eyedropper tool is on, and really just mapping it up here on my color palette. See how my kind of little icons is moving around a little bit up there? It's really, it knows exactly what color I'm selecting, right? So with this Magic Wand tool, the whole concept is that depending on my tolerance here, the tolerance really refers to the tolerance within the range of the color of the pixel that I click on will be selected. So let's just say this. I'm going to select this dark green part. I selected that dark green area, and now I have all of these other dark green areas. And I'll just show you. I'll use my Move tool and delete it. Okay, that's everything that I had selected. I'll undo. Okay, so that was what I got at a tolerance of 50. If I drop the tolerance of 50 down to like a tolerance of 25, then the tolerance for that tone of green is going to be diminished. Therefore, my selection is going to be smaller. In a perfect world, if I was to select that exact pixel area. So Magic Wand you can hit by hitting the word, you can get by clicking W. So I'm going to go up and change my tolerance to, I'll do 20 just to see if we can get a more dramatic change here. So the 20 then didn't spread out, you know, it was more contained that way. And so Paris, when you asked about the shoe on the white background, that could essentially be the perfect solution, which it really is take the Magic Wand tool, click on the white area, see if what is selected is okay with you. Not too much, not too little, but it's kind of just right as far as the path around the shoe. Literally hit this Move button and then just hit delete. It'll clean everything up, and you are now working with a shoe on a transparent background. You can move around into InDesign without worrying about, little patches of raster art in the photo that were missed or not deleted. It'd be nice. So, so that's the way I would go. The real quick and easy way I would go about doing that. And when it comes to like hair and stuff, like cutting hair off of a background, that deals with a lot of menus and all that, good stuff. You can't really just go in there and click the wand and then have it magically go away. There's a lot of fraying and stuff that happens, a lot of weird looking edges. So I can show you that stuff later, but more of the hard edge stuff like a shoe or any kind of solid object like a tool on a white background or a book or a puzzle piece, or whatever. That tool is the way to go. Quick selection tool. This is basically just this creates a brush kind of thing, and you can just really. I'm not crazy about this tool, but it really works like the magic wand tool, except it's a little more brush based. It's not the greatest tool. I'd never even use it. Crop tool. You can get to it by hitting the letter C. So this essentially is going to give you a bounding box here around your whole photo. You can grab any of these edges and bring them in. It's going to preview what the crop is as you drag it in real time, which is nice. Down here on the lower right, it's kind of showing me exactly what dimensions it is, right now. So this is good to like kind of, rough stuff in. Okay, so if I'm happy with that, I'll just hit the return key, and then it'll just get rid of all of that stuff, and then crop it down. Now you can see that when I move my image, it cut everything out of the image. So when you use that, it's called destructive editing, which means that when you make the edit, you can't get it back unless you go back into your history palette, which is something that I should probably go through. Who is not familiar with the history palette? Everyone's used it within Photoshop? Oh, so you go to Window, and then it should just be over here, History. Right, and then it'll just pop open. It's got this little graphic up here. My best friend in Photoshop from an organization standpoint is jump up to Window, Workspace, and then Reset. This will reset your entire workspace to clean it up a little bit if you have a bunch of windows everywhere and all these palettes and stuff. But let me kind of talk about this history palette. The history palette goes from the point at which you're at now in the design or in the editing of the photo all the way to the very beginning of where you started out with the photo. So if I was to, be making a lot of color changes and so on and so forth, I can actually go back in time with the history palette and undo what I already did. So here's what it looked like when I applied the CMYK color change to the whole document, and then here's what it looked like when I opened it. I can redo the crop, and then I can undo it all here. In Photoshop, the undo button, Command Z. Yes, go ahead.
So on the history tab, it goes from oldest modifications to newest.
Yep.
So that if you want to undo the past few moves, you just go up 3.
Exactly. So what's different about Photoshop and InDesign or Illustrator is Photoshop only lets you undo one time, one step in the past. So when I hit the undo button, it just goes back and forth, undo, redo, undo button, Command Z. When I Command Z, it just undoes and redos all day long. So if I want to go back to, like, let's say when I lassoed this thing, I'd have to go into the history palette. It goes back, what is that, like 7 changes back or something like that in this instance. But you can go all the way back to the beginning of the file, the original, if you want. So, sometimes you might want to do that if you want to, you're saving over the original by accident. You say, oh, you know what, I should probably have a copy of that original. Go back and go back to this original, go to File, Save As, and then you have your original, and then just keep working. So this comes in handy a lot. So anyhow, so moving on to more of these tools here. Let's see. Trying to see if I can demo any of those with using this filter. It makes sense to move on to a different one. Let me maybe move on to a different one. Are there any questions about the tools that we've seen so far? Does anyone need me to review any of the tools at this point? I'm sorry? No, but it can be. Of all the shortcuts and stuff? Yeah. You know what I did last semester was I just Google searched keyboard shortcuts for Mac or PC, or depending on for Photoshop latest. And people make PDFs and stuff all the time, but I'll add that to my homework assignment to add those things to the Moodle for you all. I'll make sure that they're PC and Mac. So. And I'll make sure that we have Illustrator, InDesign, and then Photoshop. Okay, so let's see. Oh, we didn't go through the transform or any of that stuff. So I'm going to keep moving, get into a more complex photo here, and then we'll go from there. So let's see if we can do that. Okay. Let's see. Where's my UFO? Oh, here it is. Okay. So let's go to the clone stamp. Who's clone stamped something before in Photoshop? Okay. All right. The clone. Does everyone need me to go back or anything at this point, Darren, or go back like any of like Illustrator, like showing how the vector piece? Yes. It doesn't have to be. For Illustrator, if you have any questions about it, ask me. If you want to see something specifically in Illustrator in like a demo or something, just let me know and we can pull it up. I was working on Illustrator for like a few hours last night, so I still work in it all the time, and I can just throw together like a demo and show you how to do stuff if you have any specific questions. Otherwise, if you already know how to use it, use it. Use it to your advantage. Use everything that you know in the projects as we move forward, whether it be your own photography or Illustrator or any other programs that you like to use outside of here, like maybe CorelDRAW or something. Like I'm sure you can export a file from CorelDRAW that you can place in InDesign, like a JPEG, anything like that, PNG files, whatever. Just place it in InDesign and use those. So if something comes up where Illustrator is like the only solution to solve the issue that comes up later on, we'll just go back and do it, just like that auto trace thing that I showed earlier. That just came up because I started searching for logos too last night, and I was like, oh, it's almost like it's more difficult now than it once was to just grab a vector art logo, so I had to figure out a workaround. So that's why that demo came about. But anyhow, moving on, the clone stamp tool. This is probably one of the most used tools. You can do a lot with it. It goes beyond just what I'm going to show you what it can do. I use it a lot for like fixing blemishes on skin or something like that, or getting rid of pimples from someone's face in their photo, or things like that. So the basic way to use this is just kind of figuring out what you want to clone stamp. I'm going to Control plus to zoom in here. Looking at this tree, maybe it'd be nice to like clone stamp this tree, right? So I have my brush here. I can increase and decrease the size of the brush by using the left and right bracket symbol. And so does anyone, I don't know, I don't even have a picture of it on here. Let me see if I can find it. Okay. So the left and right bracket symbol, these two. So that's going to increase and decrease the size of my clone stamp brush. The clone stamp brush is really the area that is going to be copied and pasted onto another area. So I'll show you basically how to do this. I'm increasing the size. It's kind of big enough to kind of cover most of the tree. But what I'm going to do is hold my Alt key on my keyboard, and you can see it turns into like a little target. So wherever I click my target is going to be the area that I'm going to be pulling my copy from, or pulling my clone from, okay? So I'm just going to click this like kind of edge here. Oh, yeah, you know what? I'm going to go kind of in the middle a little bit. And so if I want to, so see, what it's doing is it's previewing what is going to be copied when I click. So let's just say I'm going to build this thing here. I can see kind of a copy, which is nice, and I'm just going to click once. See how like really faded that is? Excuse me. That's because I have my settings up here, and all of the tools are going to have settings up here. Every tool that you select will have these more settings that are going to be able to refine what your tool is doing in Photoshop. So I have this opacity at 35%. So what I want to do is maybe increase that opacity or that transparency per stamp that I'm creating using this tool. So I'm going to go up to like 88%. And now you can see that it's a little bit less transparent. So that works for me. I'm just going to kind of drag and create that image. You can even see that I kind of bled a little bit in this tree in between. And so really it's just, I'm going to do a more extreme example here. I'm going to alt-click this corner of the tree and come clear across. So you can even see that I'm copying and copying and copying, and the further I go, the more I'm borrowing from this side of the image and adding it to this side. So now I'm even getting into like copying another cow in there. And you can see on this side that my target image is kind of showing me where I'm copying on the left from the right, from the left to, or from the right to the left. So I'm copying from the right, adding it to the left with the clone stamp tool. So this, let me go back into my history a bit. Does everyone kind of understand the concept of the clone stamp tool pretty much? There are a lot of, like, let me see if I can find someone's face. There we go. So for a face like this, I'd get in here with my clone stamp tool, make it a little bit smaller, and maybe, get rid of like this stuff, like this pimple that, is on this person's face. I'm just going to alt-click this cleaner area and then just see my preview and just click a couple times and it's fixed. This is kind of typically what you would use that stamp tool for. If you if if they had a lot of pimples and stuff, you can get rid of. So I'm just borrowing from the good area and then adding it to the area that has pimples and so on. Let's see. A lot of times in these stock photos you can find stains on their, shirts and so on and so forth. And these are all things that you would just, alt-click and clone stamp out. Sometimes you can find some really, goofy, random things inside of, stock photos when you work with them. So that's typically what I would use. You see kind of how this background is a little bit scuffed up. Again, you could increase the size of your brush from the clone stamp tool, and you can go up and change the opacity to, like, let's say 20%. So I don't want to copy too much because I don't want it to have that clone stamp tool look that you would, people would notice very easily. So I just kind of put my opacity to 20%, a little bit lower, so I can see through every stamp that I'm doing. And I'm just going to alt-click this kind of really solid blue area, and then just kind of brush it, brush the clone stamp tool until these areas go away. You can see how like the color in the background gets a little bit lighter too. That's why I'm kind of using it at an opacity like that. So I can get rid of these without having it look noticeable. I'll go to like 100% and show you what like a noticeable clone stamp treatment will look like. Oh, that's really terrible. Here, try it again. Something like that. It's just like where the color, well, I can't. It doesn't look like that bad when I'm zoomed into it, but when I zoom out, I don't know if it's really that bad on the screen, but this area here, it's got like this blemish on the wall, and it's like, where is that coming from? So someone who with a trained eye would be able to see something like that. So that's a couple of good uses for the clone stamp tool. Clouds are good to, if you need more clouds in the sky, just add them with that tool. Clouds are fuzzy enough to where you're not really going to notice that much of a difference when you're clone stamping them, rather than like solid objects. Moving on, the art history brush. That's just really going to go back to the original in a certain area that you changed. So let me see. What can I do? Let me go ahead and select this cow here. Let me select this guy's face. So I'm just magic wanding this piece here to kind of give a general. I wanted to change it a little bit. So I have this layer. Let me pop my layers open. Selected. I didn't introduce you to the brush tool yet, but I will. This is the normal brush tool. You can get to it by clicking B. You can also adjust its opacity too, so less brush, or more transparent brush, less transparent brush. You can change the size. Hardness is like the solidness of the edge, so like a marker rather than like a poofy cloud of brush. Go ahead.
Is that just the paintbrush tool? Like you just have the area selected?
Yes. Yeah, so the reason why I stayed in those lines so well is because I had that area selected first. So that's a good trick. Like, so say, imagine a shoe on a white background. You might want to do a selection of the white background, and then what you can do is invert your selection, which means select the opposite of what you have selected, and then make your color changes or so on to your shoe itself, so you can still have that clean edge and not be so perfect with the brush and the mouse and all that. So it helps you get some control there. So I obviously just kind of messed up the side of this cow's face, and I'm going to hit Command D to deselect what I just selected. And then going back to the art history brush, I have that selected. And with the art history brush, you can actually go over a piece of the image that you edited and take a step back, and then reveal that original image. So, I mean, there's random times when something like this could come about. Maybe let me see.
Is that the eraser tool?
No, this is actually the art history brush. So it basically erases,
Art history?
yeah. So it erases what you did currently back to what you did previously. So let me show you another example. Let me get this guy here. And I'm going to do something. I'm going to use this burn tool, and I'll kind of explain what this burn tool does here in a minute. Or I can just do it now. Really, the burn tool takes shadows, makes them darker. It takes midtones and makes them darker, and it makes highlights and makes them darker. It makes them darker by this exposure, which is the higher the exposure, the darker it makes the highlights, the shadows, or the midtones. Okay, so I just darkened the shadows around this guy's eye. I'm going to darken the midtones around his eye. See how it's like darkening him?
Yeah.
And I can just brush it, I can brush it. So he looks like he has a horrible black eye, or he got punched in the face or something. It's even bringing out some of the red, so it's really crazy, what that does from his eyeballs. So I'm just going to go back to my art history brush. Like, say I did a little bit too much. I can just go back without doing, I'll undo that. Without going back step for step, like, oh, at what point did I screw up? Maybe I just say, well, my darkening spread out too much there, so I'm just going to take my art history brush and kind of shape it up a little bit. So it has its benefits to kind of fix any mistakes that you've done. Okay, so eraser tool, well, let me art history brush this till it's all gone. Okay, so now I'm kind of back where I wanted to be with this cow. Eraser tool, let me go back to the art history brush. So the art history brush too, kind of take a step back here. It has an opacity as well. It has, you can adjust a hardness to it, the hardness of the edge of what history you're bringing back. So if I put my hardness to 100% and I kind of go over the edge, you can see now it's a little bit of a harder edge. It's a lot of bit of a harder edge that I'm using. So opacity as well. I can bring this down, and now I can go back into history little by little. Click 1, click 2, click 3, and step by step I'm erasing the edits that I've made. Now, if you want to actually erase the image itself, you could hit the eraser tool. So this is E, which is pretty simple to get to. It's pretty intuitive. And this, of course, will just delete things. So again, we're going back to our checkered background showing transparency. And this is just a very hands-on way of deleting things. So again, this has an opacity too. So this is 100% opacity, meaning every click is taking out every single transparent every single pixel. with the exception of these edges, right? Because I have a softness to this brush, and I call it a brush, but it's actually the eraser brush. So here's kind of my settings for that. So this size here is going to adjust basically the size of the whole thing. And then this kind of, you can adjust the fuzziness of the edges with that. So you can see here it's kind of like, and I can even go into my eyedropper tool. Where is that? Eye. Okay. And just click and you can see it's all the same color, but it's just a little bit more transparent than it is over here. No, it's a little less transparent here than it is over here. All right. Let's see. E. I can increase the hardness of that. So now what I'm erasing has a much harder edge, and then everywhere in between. The very soft, here's 50%. So it's kind of a little bit more manageable to use and work with. I can increase the size and decrease the size just the same as I can with the clone stamp tool brush, just with these two bracket keys. Left making it smaller, right making it larger. And then that's just how I adjust it here like this. Real quick, just with your hands rather than going up here into the menus and doing all that stuff. And so again, my art history brush, I can bring this stuff back to life, you know, that I've erased even. So maybe that, you know, maybe that could be of some use to you sometime. Again, for the art history brush, I had my opacity real low, so I'm bringing it up to 100% now so I can bring it back a little bit faster rather than clicking over and over again. And just like any other brush, I can increase and decrease the size with the left and right brackets, and then get everything back with my art history brush. Going through, what time is it? 5:30. Does anyone have any questions so far? Is it all kind of making sense? Have you seen this before? Maybe, kind of. Okay. That's all right. Okay. Let's see what else. What else? We have all these really funky tools. Let me see if I don't want to go through everything today. Oh, transform, undo, Command Z. I think that's the one that everyone knows and loves from Illustrator class. Oh, Command Spacebar, click. So that'll zoom to a selection. So I'm going to hold Command Spacebar. So now I have it's a magnifying glass. Click and drag, and I'm zooming into the area that I've clicked on down to like that pixel. So if you want to get that granular, you can do it that way. And that helps instead of, just kind of click, 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 or usually I'll use Command plus, Command minus. Command plus, Command minus will just increase and decrease the size of the entire canvas. And then you can just use your space bar, hold that down, get your hand out, and then you can kind of navigate around the image that way. Otherwise, let me think. Trying to think if there's anything else that I'm missing here. Let me just look at my cheat sheet. Oh yeah, transform. So transform is pretty simple. Let me just see if I can find an image that I can work with pretty easily. Yeah, I'll use this guy again. My go-to. So to transform, maybe I'll just take his head. So I'm going to use the lasso tool and go around from the center of this gentleman's face and open up my layers palette, have my selection still active, double click on this background layer, just hit OK. What I'm going to do is actually, with my move tool selected, I'm going to hold down the Alt key. And with the Alt key held down, again, I'm getting ready to copy and duplicate this to on the same layer, essentially. But you can see that this double arrow thing happens, where it's like a white arrow comes behind the black arrow, on and off. So I click Alt, you can click this piece and then drag it, and it's actually just going to copy. It's just going to make a copy of this guy's head. Now I can move this around or whatever. I'm going to do a Command C. So just like all of your other programs, Illustrator, Word, the internet, you can just copy and paste just like you would any of those. So Control C, Control X. So that's cut. No, that's copy, cut. I'm saying Control. It's Command or Control depending on the Mac or PC. So I have that copied to my clipboard, that perfect circle. I'm going to go down here in my Layers palette and then hit this Create a New Layer button. And that's going to give me this layer 1 here. And you can see that it's got a transparent background. And so basically what I'm going to do is, one second. Is basically I'm going to paste what's on my clipboard onto this new layer. So I'm going to make sure this layer is selected, make sure it's clicked on, and Command V. That's going to paste it on there. Here's my visibility for my layers, so I can actually turn off the background layer by clicking on this little eye symbol. And so now this guy's kind of isolated on a background, looks like, something that could be like a button. And essentially transforms. I'm going to transform this guy's head. So what you can do is hit Command T. Command T is transform. You can also, I'm going to hit the return key. To kind of untransform something, once you've hit Command T, you have to hit Enter. So you have to hit Return. It's not a Command D. It's not like it's selected. It's being transformed. So you have to apply the transformation before you can go to something else to transform. So I'm going to do that again. Oh, you know what? I want to show you where it is in the menu. You can actually go to Edit and Transform as well. You can do the same thing that way. And then in this instance, it would be Scale. But Command T will get you what you need. And then essentially, it's going to give you all these little anchor points around the image. Also, it's going to give you this little target in the center of the image. So I can move this little target wherever. And the reason why I'm moving this is the point of reference in which you are transforming to. Okay? I'll show you what I mean. It was in the center. Now I'm going to grab this little anchor point, click, hold, and drag. See how I can kind of stretch his face and everything. Oh, you know what? I don't think that anchor point does anything right now. It doesn't. So that anchor point is pretty worthless unless you're, let me just check. Yeah, unless you're rotating. So what the anchor point is going to do is, I'll show you in a second, but essentially this is transforming. You can see that the proportions are not, being maintained. You can maintain the proportions by hitting Shift, holding Shift, and just like as any other object you would use in like, Illustrator or something, you can just click, drag, and constrain the proportions with Shift. I can do that from this corner on. I can do that from here. I can squeeze in this way. The shift key, of course, is not going to work. Yes.
So what did that target point that you do?
Gotcha. So this target point here, if I click it and drag it over to like this corner per se, and I kind of navigate, you see how my mouse is like changing all these different states and stuff? When it changes to this like little corner looking state, yeah, it means like it's going to rotate whatever I have, but it's going to rotate on that anchor point. So that's what that anchor point is for. So like when I rotate, the center of my rotation is around that anchor point. So like if I move it to this part, then the center of my rotation is over there. So it's just, yeah, so that's really all it does. When it's in the middle, it's just going to do, it's actually just going to spin it. Yeah. I'm trying to think what else is important about transforming. One thing that's important about transforming, and oh, go ahead.
Can you show me like how you scale? So you just press S to scale.
Yes.
Is there any way? Can you use like a direct selection tool to just like grab a corner and make it so that it retains its proportions? I make it hold shift, but is there any other way to scale?
Besides using the transform tool within this itself, no. But you can scale the whole entire artboard in the image menu. And you would want to do that for a few different reasons. Let me just show you this. So I have this guy transformed. I haven't increased the size of him. I've only decreased the size of him, right? So I'm going to take this anchor point, and he looks pretty sharp when I get in here. I mean, it's not really, and I'm pretty close. You know, it's not really pixelated, obviously, or anything like that. But what I'm going to do is actually I'm going to just artificially scale him like up, you know, like so. And now you can see that you're starting to get some pixel, you know, some kind of, well, not so much. It's a pretty big image. And actually this kind of corner looked pretty rough. Yeah, like it's not as smooth as it once was. And some people will take like images and kind of scale them up just this kind of way, this artificial way, and it really, you can tell it's done, especially in print, if it's scaled up that way. You know, because this edge gets kind of feathery. So let me just hit return and undo that. The more proper way to increase the size of something, of an object, would be to, let me just trim my canvas here, would be to actually go up to image, and then you'd go to this image size menu, and then the image size menu, you would adjust the size of it this way. Here's the thing that the transform, you know, scaling up menu doesn't do, and that's account for the change in the resolution of the image, and then that's why it gets pixelated so much on the edges, and even in the artwork itself. So here you can increase the width, height, and resolution of an image within the menu. So I'm just clicking up, and you can see that I'm increasing the width and the height proportionally. So this is a perfectly square image because it started out as a circle, and I cropped it down. You know, let's say I needed this guy's head to be like 15 inches, you know, because I'm putting it on a banner or something. If I increase it this way, you can see that my resolution, as I'm going up, my resolution is going down. And for a printed piece that you're going to view close up, not from like a billboard from like, you know, 5 lanes away or something, you need it to be at 300 dpi. So the way to do that is using this resample button. So I'm going to cancel that. I'm going to go back to image size. I'm going to hit resample, and then I have this option, preserve details for an enlargement. There's a couple of other options too. This smoother one I feel is good for photos actually like this that have a lot of tones to it, a lot of little subtle details, just to smoothen it out, because you are going to lose some resolution when you increase the size of it. So I increased it to 15 inches. I have resample on, which means that it's like kind of pushing more pixels into a larger area to compensate. And as I increase the size, you can see that resolution stayed at 300 the whole time as I was clicking it up. And then you just hit OK, and then that's how you would resize an image properly while maintaining the resolution in it, so it still looks good, and it doesn't look like, you know, my grandma, you know, printed it out on Microsoft Word or something, you know, and it's just that's how you would do it. So a lot of your shoe images that you'll capture, they might be at 72 DPI, right? Eventually, we're going to work on these shoe catalogs, and pulling these images from the web, they're going to be really small. And what we're eventually going to want to do is actually increase the size of them to make sure that they're 300 DPI and ready for print rather than being 72 for the web. So that's how we would do that using that menu. But I'll show you step by step how we're going to do that when we get to that kind of toll gate and get ready to cross over to the next step. Any questions? Do you want to? We'll go back to that image size menu too. Let me see. I'm going through these. Okay. Burn and dodge are the only other tools we need to get to. So again, I showed you the burn tool from this guy, and I kind of explained it a little bit. Is there anyone that wants to understand the burn tool a little bit more? It really just darkens pixels. So when do I use the burn tool? Usually when I want to fake in a shadow of something. Instead of using the drop shadow, you know, if I post something to Facebook, for instance, my sister uploaded a photo of like a Zune. Have you ever seen a Zune before? Okay. Yeah. So I was trying to Photoshop a picture of a Zune, and it's like a music player onto someone's hand. It wasn't really supposed to be there. What I did was I used a layer for the hand, a layer for the Zune, put the Zune behind it, right? And then I just burned some of the area around where the Zune and the hand overlapped, so you could kind of see a shadow, more realistic than a drop shadow. So way more realistic than a drop shadow, because I think everyone now can see a drop shadow from like a mile away. Yes, sir.
So, like, you would have burned right into that phone?
Yeah. Yes. So I have my burn tool selected, and then so I'm looking at the area that I want to burn. Okay, so I have a really light area, and this is a really good example, and a really dark area, and then I have a mid-tone area here. You can target those areas with this range menu here. So again, if I want to darken the highlights, I'm going to go to this menu and hit highlights, and I'm going to darken those in. If I want to go to midtones or shadows, again, same thing. I'm just going to target them, figure out how intense I want my burn to be. So 100% being the most intense, 0% being the least. I'm going to go to 100% and show an extreme example of burning that shadow. And then see, I'm clicking and dragging, and you can see that the shadows are getting burned. See where see where this area is and it gets really bright? It's not, the filter's not touching that because that's more of a highlight area.
So you have to select which area you're trying to target.
Yeah, it kind of refines it. See, I can even get really messy because this guy's skin pigment is very light. And so basically I have shadows here selected, and I'm even going over, you know, his hand here. And his pigment, he has such little pigmentation that it's not even really affecting it whatsoever because those pixels are brighter. Now if I was to hit highlights, now you can see that he's getting, his hand is getting burned that way. This is really good for teeth. He's got pretty bright teeth, but you know, if you want to brighten someone's teeth really quick in a photo, you know, just go, well actually no, you wouldn't hit the burn tool. You would use the dodge tool. The dodge tool does the exact opposite of the burn tool, so that just brightens up the shadows, brightens up the midtones, brightens up the highlights. So maybe you'll see some, that's pretty low. I gotta increase the exposure. So see, kind of his bottom teeth are really dark and they're just getting instantly bright because I have my highlights on. And it's just brightening up his teeth. It's getting a little bit of that gum too, so this is kind of like where your selections would help you out. So here's kind of a before and after. I messed up a little bit of that part. So I can, you know, right, take the art history brush. Oh, what happened here? I can't go back. Okay. All right, so you cannot go back into history once you burn something. That means that's destructive editing. So with that tool, you just got to be really careful, I suppose. But you can kind of see the, well, no. I could see the before and after. Yeah, the before and after. This is good for around eyeballs too, if you want to brighten up his eyes. And that stuff makes a huge difference. Like, it doesn't seem like a lot, but it actually does. It makes like a photo look more professional. Because everything's basically photoshopped. Everything you see is photoshopped in some way, shape, or form. It's never just the way it originally is. Even photographers will just do that. Yes, sir.
So if a lot of this stuff you can do like color modification in Photoshop, what's the huge difference that you see between Photoshop and Lightroom?
Oh, Lightroom. Photoshop is, to me, is more, you can get to more detail that way and construct like an image out of multiple images, right? In Lightroom, you can really, you can do more in Photoshop than you can do in Lightroom, in my opinion, from a you know, an image creation standpoint, right? So in Lightroom, and correct me if I'm wrong, you can't really take this guy and his figure and knock the background out of him. So like from an image, I think the difference between the two is probably photo editing, color correction, as opposed to image creation, color correction. So thanks for the question, though. It's a great question. That is where I wanted to go before we had a break. So let's say about, I think we got a lot to do today. Let's say about 12 minutes, 12 to 15 is fine. For a break, yeah.